Act 1. The day I wasn't chosen. The last time Hyunwoo held my hands, he did it like he was apologizing with his skin. We were sitting across from each other in a quiet cafe in Hanam-dong, the kind with linen napkins and porcelain cups that never chipped. The windows were fogged from the cold outside, but my palms were burning where his thumbs traced slow circles, over and over, like if he repeated the motion enough, it would undo what he was about to say. Zola, he started. That was how I knew. Not Jigia. Not love. Just my name, careful and formal like a document being notarized. I watched his mouth move as he explained. His parents, his father's health, the family pressure, the engagement announcement already drafted by a publicist I'd never met. He spoke gently, kindly, even like he was telling me the weather would be bad tomorrow and I should carry an umbrella. It isn't about you, he said, eyes shiny, voice tight. You did nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. I smiled because my body hadn't caught up to the moment yet. I nodded because nodding was easier than screaming. I told him I understood because understanding was the only dignity left to me. What I didn't say was this. I had already chosen him everywhere it mattered. I had learned his silences. I knew which childhood memories still made his jaw clench, which nights he couldn't sleep unless my leg was thrown over his. I had loved him quietly, fiercely, in ways that didn't fit into his family's definition of proper. But I was not the right kind of woman to stand beside him in family photos. I was black. Hidden. Loud with my laughter. Soft with my emotions. Unapologetic in ways his world could not digest. So I was discarded politely. No shouting. No cheating scandal. No villain to hate. Just a decision made somewhere above my pay grade. When we stood to leave, he pulled me into a hug that lasted 1 second too long. His breath shook against my hair. I'll never forget you, he whispered. I wanted to tell him that forgetting me would have hurt less. I left Korea 3 weeks later with one suitcase and a heart so heavy it bent my spine. For a long time I thought that leaving was the hardest part. I was wrong. The hardest part was learning how to live in a world where I had been almost chosen. 5 years passed anyway. They always do. Pain doesn't disappear. Transforms. Mine became ambition. I buried myself in work. First as an assistant in a small gallery in Accra, then as a junior curator in London, then finally as the curator. The one people whispered about. The one who brought African stories into rooms that had never made space for them. I learned how to take up space without asking. How to wear silk and authority at the same time. How to glow without permission. By the time Korea invited me back, I had already forgiven myself for loving a man who couldn't fight for me. I told myself I was healed. Then I saw his name on the guest list. Lee Hyunwoo. Married. My chest tightened in a way I didn't recognize. On the night of the exhibition I wore gold. Not loud, not subtle. Intentional. My hair fell in soft waves down my back. My skin glowed the way it only does when you've survived something that once almost killed you. The room buzzed with Korean elites, critics, donors. Cameras flashed. Glasses clinked. I was mid-conversation when the air shifted. You don't forget the feeling of being looked at like you are the answer to a question someone has been asking for years. I turned slowly. Hyunwoo stood frozen near the entrance, his wife at his side, her hand looped through his arm like an afterthought. His face drained of color as his eyes met mine. And in that moment I knew. He hadn't mourned me. He had buried me alive. He'll know. Because the way he stared, raw, unguarded, undone, told me everything. This wasn't reunion. This was reckoning. And as I lifted my chin and met his gaze without flinching, one truth settled deep in my bones. I was no longer the woman who begged to be chosen. I was the woman who would decide what his regret would cost him. Act 2. The woman he married and the one he never stopped wanting. I didn't approach him. That was my first victory. I let the room orbit me. Critics leaning in, donors praising my vision, cameras catching my smile from angles that made me look untouchable. I spoke Korean fluently now, effortlessly, and every sentence felt like a quiet flex. I had learned the language he once translated for me. I had learned myself. Still I felt him. Hyunwoo's attention was a weight between my shoulder blades. Heavy. Insistent. Familiar in the most dangerous way. When I finally turned again he was closer. Alone. His wife had drifted toward a group of women near the champagne table. She was beautiful in a careful way. Soft makeup, modest dress, posture trained to impress parents rather than lovers. She looked like someone who had followed every rule and still ended up lonely. Zola, Hyunwoo said. My name sounded different in his mouth now. Older. Regret-soaked. Mr. Lee, I replied smoothly, offering my hand like he was a stranger who mattered only professionally. He hesitated before taking it. His palm was warm. Still familiar. Still wrong. Congratulations, he said. The exhibition is extraordinary. I smiled, polite and distant. Thank you. I worked very hard to be here. Without you, my silence added. His eyes searched my face like they were looking for the girl he left behind. She wasn't there. You look... He stopped himself. Swallowed. You look well. I tilted my head. So do you... Marriage seems to suit you. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. His jaw tightened. Zola. Enjoy the exhibition, I interrupted gently. Excuse me. I walked away before he could reach for me with words he no longer had the right to use. Later I found myself on the terrace, breathing in cold Seoul air and pretending my heart wasn't racing like it had just run a marathon. You haven't changed, a voice said behind me. I closed my eyes for half a second before turning. You have, I corrected. You've learned how to stand beside disappointment. That hurt him. I saw it land. I never stopped thinking about you, he said quietly. There was the sentence men offer when they want absolution without consequence. And yet, I replied, you married someone else. His eyes flicked instinctively toward the glass doors. It was complicated. No, I said softly. It was simple. You chose what was easier. The silence between us crackled. His gaze dropped to my lips before he caught himself. I wasn't brave enough, he admitted. But seeing you now doesn't change the past, I finished. It only makes it louder. He stepped closer. Too close. I'm not happy, he confessed, voice low. I haven't been. Not since. I laughed then. A short, sharp sound. Don't do that, I warned. Don't turn your marriage into a confession booth for your regret. His eyes darkened. Do you feel nothing? I looked at him. Really looked. The man I had loved was still there, buried beneath expectations, duty and cowardice. But loving him had taught me something irreversible. I feel plenty, I said. That's why I won't touch you. His breath hitched. You still want me, he said, almost pleading. Yes, I admitted. And that's exactly why this is dangerous. Footsteps interrupted us. His wife stepped onto the terrace. Hyunwoo, she said softly, eyes flicking between us. They're asking for you inside. She looked at me then. Properly. And in her gaze I saw it. He knew. Not details. Not history. But the truth of impact. The way a woman recognizes the ghost that has been haunting her marriage. Your exhibition is beautiful, she said to me, voice steady. I'm glad I could see it. Thank you, I replied, meaning something different entirely. Hyunwoo didn't speak as she took his arm. But as they walked away I felt it, his hesitation. The pause of a man standing at the edge of a cliff, wondering if the fall might finally be worth it. I exhaled slowly. I had come back to Korea thinking closure was behind me. I was wrong. Closure was standing right in front of me, married, regretful, and still dangerously capable of breaking my heart. And this time I wasn't sure who would survive if I let him try again. Act 3. The things we say when we don't touch. Hyunwoo started showing up everywhere after that. Not dramatically. Not uninvited. Always with plausible deniability tucked neatly into his tailored suits. A panel discussion on global art ethics. A charity auction supporting cultural preservation. A private viewing requested by a corporate patron. Every time he kept his distance. Every time his eyes betrayed him. And somehow that restraint was more intimate than any touch. We spoke in fragments at first, professional, careful. But conversations have a way of remembering what bodies refuse to forget. One evening, after a donor dinner that left me socially drained and emotionally wired, he found me alone in the gallery's archive room. The lights were dim, the air cool, the walls lined with stories that had survived erasure. You curate like you're correcting history, he said quietly. I looked up from a crate of photographs. Someone has to. You always did that, he murmured. Fought to be seen. And you always admired it, I replied. Until it became inconvenient. He flinched. I was wrong, he said. About so many things. I know, I replied. That's why this hurts. He stepped closer, stopping just short of crossing the line. His presence wrapped around me, familiar gravity, new tension. My wife doesn't see me, he said. Not the real me. I closed the crate with deliberate care. Then you should tell her. Not me. She sees the version my parents wanted, he continued. The one who follows, who obeys, who survives. And I loved the man who almost chose himself, I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. The air thickened. Do you ever wonder, he asked, what would have happened if I had fought for you? Every nerve in my body lit up. I don't let myself, I answered honestly. Because that path ends with me losing something I worked too hard to become. His hand flexed at his side. You're stronger now. Yes, I said. That's why I'm dangerous to you. He smiled sadly. You always were. It became our pattern. Long conversations that slipped too close to memory. Shared silences that screamed with things unsaid. Glances that lingered half a second too long. But never touch. Because touch would shatter us. One night after a late meeting he walked me to my car. The city hummed around us, alive and indifferent. You don't belong to this version of me, he said suddenly. I never did, I replied. He turned to me then, really looked at me like he was memorizing a painting he knew he'd never own. If I had met you now, he said, I would have been braver. And if I had stayed, I said, I would have disappeared. We stood there, close enough that my breath hitched, close enough that my body remembered what my mind refused to forget. Zola, he whispered. Tell me to stop. I searched his face. The boy I loved. The man he became. The stranger he still was. Stop, I said. He closed his eyes like the word hurt him. Then footsteps approached. His wife stood across the street watching us. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just tired. That look stayed with me long after Hyunwoo walked away. That night, alone in my apartment, I stared at my reflection. I looked powerful, accomplished, desired, and dangerously close to repeating an old pattern. Because no matter how much I had grown, one truth refused to loosen its grip. Love doesn't disappear just because it's inconvenient. But neither does the damage it leaves behind. I pressed my palm to my chest and made myself a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. If he crossed the line, I would not follow him into a life that required my silence. Even if my heart begged me to. Act 4. The night he asked me to choose him back. The call came after midnight. I stared at Hyunwoo's name on my screen long enough to remind myself that I didn't owe him anything. Not comfort, not clarity, not closure. I answered anyway. Zola, he said, voice rough. I need to see you. No, I replied immediately. I'm at your building. My heart slammed against my ribs. I opened the door to find him standing there like a man who had already lost something and was bracing for the rest to follow. His tie was gone. His hair undone. His eyes raw in a way I had never seen before. I told her, he said before I could speak. My chest tightened. Told her what? The truth. That my heart never came back to me after you left. The words hit harder than I expected. And? I asked quietly. She asked me if I had ever chosen her, he continued. Not loved. Chosen. I didn't move. I couldn't lie, he whispered. So she's leaving. Silence wrapped around us like a held breath. This isn't a victory, I said. I know, he replied. It's a reckoning. He stepped inside, stopping a careful distance away. I am choosing you now, he said. Publicly. Completely. Even if it costs me everything. The old version of me would have collapsed into his arms. The new one stood still. You're choosing me because your marriage is already broken, I said. That's not bravery. That's damage control. He flinched. I waited too long. Yes, I agreed. And waiting has consequences. He reached out then stopped himself. Do you love me? The question cracked something open in my chest. I never stopped, I admitted. But love isn't the problem. Then what is? Trust, I said. Safety. Knowing that the next time the world demands a sacrifice, it won't be me. He swallowed hard. I was afraid. So was I said. The difference is I still chose myself. He dropped to his knees in front of me. Not dramatically. Not performatively. Just a man stripped of certainty. Tell me what to do, he said. I stepped back. There's nothing you can do, I said gently. You can only become someone who would have chosen me the first time. His shoulders shook. And if I do? I took a long breath. Then you'll do it without me waiting. At dawn, I watched the city wake up alone. The ache was familiar, but this time it didn't hollow me out. It clarified me. I understood something then that had taken 5 years to learn. Closure isn't reunion. Love isn't possession. And sometimes the bravest ending is walking away from the story you once begged to finish. I didn't know if Hyunwoo would grow into the man he needed to be. But I knew I already had. Act 5. The woman who chose herself. I left Korea 2 weeks later. Not in pieces this time. Not running. Not broken. I left complete. The final night of my exhibition, the gallery overflowed with voices and light and stories that no longer needed permission to exist. I stood in the center of it all, grounded, present, exactly where I was meant to be. Hyunwoo did not come. And that, more than anything, told me he had finally listened. Because loving me no longer meant possessing me. It meant letting me go. At Incheon Airport, I watched planes lift into the sky and felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not relief. Not triumph. Peace. The kind that settles in your bones when you stop negotiating with the past. On the flight, I opened my journal and wrote the words I had never allowed myself to say. I loved him. He loved me. And love was not enough to save us. That truth no longer hurt. It freed me. 6 months later, I stood in Lagos beneath warm lights and familiar laughter, opening a new exhibition, one that carried my full name on the banner. Zola Mensa, unwived. As I spoke about reclamation and visibility, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message. Hyunwoo, I resigned today. I'm rebuilding from the ground up. Not for you. For myself. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I smiled. I typed back only 3 words. I'm proud of you. And meant it. Later that night, I walked home barefoot along the terrace of my apartment, wine in hand, city glowing beneath me. I thought about the girl who had once begged to be chosen. I wished I could tell her this. You don't glow because someone finally sees you. You glow because you stopped shrinking to be loved. Hyunwoo had been a chapter. A beautiful one. A painful one. A necessary one. But I was the story. And for the first time in my life, that was more than enough. The end. Some loves don't end because they weren't real. They end because one person refused to disappear for it. Zola's story isn't about rejection. It's about reclamation. About what happens when a woman stops waiting to be chosen, and chooses herself instead. And if this story stirred something in you, if you've ever loved deeply, left bravely, or returned stronger, then you already belong here. This is Melanin in Seoul. Where Black women are seen, desired, powerful, and never an afterthought. Where love is complicated, growth is necessary, and glow-ups are earned. Subscribe for more Afro-Korean romance stories that cut deep and heal louder. Like if this story resonated with you. Comment below, would you have given him a second chance, or walked away like Zola? And turn on notifications so you never miss a story where melanin meets meaning. Because here, we don't beg for love. We build lives that love has to rise to meet. Melanin in Seoul.